it's sometimes a bit more effective that way. In that case, I would probably be the one to go in and do it.
Okay.
I would be the one to speak on behalf of the library in that case, and I'm quite comfortable doing that.
Okay. How would you describe the structure and the culture of your organization?
And when you say organization, do you mean the college or the library?
Library.
The structure and culture. It's not very big. It's a fairly compact structure, but that said, it's somewhat hierarchical, and it's more at the classified staff levels that it gets hierarchical, because that's dictated by the stratification in the union contract. The unionization really kind of dictates certain levels. Curiously enough, I'm the head librarian. I'm responsible for everything. Technically speaking, no one in the library reports to me, technically speaking, because I'm a faculty member, and according to the contracts, none of the other full-time librarians and none of the classified staff are allowed to report to a faculty member. We all report to the same dean. The practice, though, and I don't know, don't ever tell HR, but when it comes to employee reviews, anything like that, he just delegates everything to me.
Okay.
So I write all of the reviews, everything like that. So the structure is if you look at it technically speaking, it's kind of flat at the faculty level, and then the classified is stratified. But from my perspective, it's sort of me and then the 3 faculty librarians. The adjuncts all do actually report to me, and they kind of sit. But it's kind of weirdly compact that way. The culture is interesting. I got to think a little bit carefully how to frame it. I think that the culture is one where everyone here, I'm trying to think of how the model would be. I'll be honest, there are personalities here who do not get along with each other.
Okay.
I don't think that's unusual in an organization.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, I'm almost trying to think of it like a spider web or some sort of network or something, where the people who don't get along seldom have to work directly or communicate directly.
Mm.
And when there is work that affects them both, it will usually go through me.
Okay.
So it tends to be okay that way. I think that the other full-time librarians might function to a lesser extent, but in a similar capacity, where if it deals with one of their particular areas, it'll go through them before it'll pass over to the other person. And that's in part a function of how people in one strata cannot dictate to people in the same strata, it's kind of funny that way. So they all go through me, or go through, if it's a matter dealing with technical services, they go through Erin, for example. And so things work that way.
Okay.
We generally do all get along well, but there is a little bit of that kind of, let's flow through Peter and make sure everything is smoother that way. And that's okay.
And I was going to say that, so it's more like a flow. The library itself is the culture.
I find it does.
It works out.
It does, yeah. I'm kind of very West Coast in a way. Things happen, Sometimes things just happen, and it's okay to let things happen and let things play out. The personalities that don't get along, as I said earlier, sometimes you have to step in and mediate, and sometimes you're just like, okay, you've got it off your chest. Now we're just going to continue along, and the work continues. So there is a flow to it in more than one sense of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you have any tips in regards to staffing?
Oh my gosh, wow. Given the environment I'm in, I think it's important to know what you can and cannot do, specifically with regard to union contracts, union rules. In the library, there are 3 different unions represented. There's the full-time faculty union, there's the adjunct faculty union, and there's the classified staffing union.
Okay.
They each have their own contract. And it's a steep learning curve sometimes figuring out what can and can't be done. I mean, some of the rules are really arcane. really arcane. So that is really a very important point about managing the staff here. Things that I've learned in the past, when you communicate the most important things. And don't feel you need to respond to everything or not right away. Staff sometimes have complaints. A few years ago had an adjunct who had an unhappy relationship with me, had an unhappy relationship with my predecessor, had an unhappy relationship with her predecessor, but was deeply entrenched. And because of the protection of unionized status, I couldn't get her out, much as it would have made for a more harmonious workplace. And there was at one point she sent a several-page email through her union to HR complaining about various things that I was doing. And HR forwarded this to me and to my dean and said, we would like to have a meeting with you. And I read through this email from this woman, and I was flagging it. I had all these little sticky, like, no, wrong, are you kidding me, kind of things. But in the end, you have to look at it and say, what is the actual core issue here? The core issue is she's complaining about scheduling. And so even though I had this thing all flagged and marked up, when HR came and sat down with me and my boss, I said, the core issue here is the scheduling from what I read. Here is an email from her. There's that documentation. Here's an email from her from 6 months ago where she said, this schedule looks good to me. Thank you. I accept it. And, so dealing with staff, dealing with any situation, you have to kind of get to the bottom of what are you really asking? What are you really complaining about? What are you really trying to say? And just deal with that and put everything else aside.
I see.
But in a unionized environment, the rules of the contracts are really critical to know and obey.
Now, is just the library?
No, the entire campus.
The entire campus,
yeah,
okay.
The entire campus.
So as far as HR, any aspects in HR that you would find challenging, it would be generally just the union. Dealing with union issues is really tricky. And I say that as a union member, I have a union representing me, but it can be challenging. In terms of classified staff, we have tried in the past to reclassify the staff upwardly. Okay. Their jobs have changed. The job descriptions haven't kept up with it. We need this work being done. And so they deserve to be reclassified at a higher level, make more money in that. Well, colleges don't always want to pay more money if they can avoid it. And the process has to go through all of the steps of HR, but the union also gets a say. And I found myself with a past situation. I was in full support of it. Everyone above me in my chain of command was in full support of this case. And HR came back and basically said, no, it doesn't fly. And the staff member was really upset. And all I was left to do in the end was say, well, can your union fight for you on this? And the union was not in a position of strength to fight. And I felt really helpless in that case. I did all I could, and she understood that, fortunately. But her, it was one of those situations where all I could do is say, work through your union, and I can't do anything for you. And the union itself was kind of, here we've got this nice shiny contract, but they couldn't really enforce certain things somehow. So it's an interesting environment, and one I didn't experience at my previous job. The support staff were unionized, but again, the library was very large. We had our own HR department, and I wasn't able to make decisions that really impacted it at that level. Okay. If I'd stepped out of line, boy, I would have heard about it from the union, I'm sure. But here I'm much more intimately tied to things dealing with their contracts for all three levels. So their contracts, do they also discuss how you would discipline or terminations?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every little detail is in this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's something I'd learned from working at my previous institution, actually in the circulation department, because that had a large number of classified staff. The steps that you need to go through in terms of disciplining were very explicitly laid out. But it gives me a good sense of what's fair as well. I had an adjunct faculty member whose performance I was not happy with. And the thing with adjuncts is the scheduling can be very piecemeal, and frequently the adjuncts are used when I'm out of the office and I need someone to provide coverage or others. So I seldom was able to come face to face with this person. And I talked to HR and I said, I don't want to keep this person on any longer. The person is not meeting performance expectations. And HR came back and said, well, what have you discussed with the person? I said, you know what, you're right, I haven't. And I'm telling tales here, but my dean really did not want this person to be continued on. And I said to my dean, but I have to give at least one more semester because I need to be able to say, here's where you're not meeting performance expectations. Here's your opportunity to correct that. We're going to monitor that through the next semester. So that's what we did, and the person is no longer with us, as it turns out. But I had to be fair and go through that process.
So going off of that, do you give performance reviews periodically?
I do, but they're according to what the union contracts say. So the classified staff, our annual performance reviews, I just gave 2 of them last week, and I've got 2 more due later this month. And the adjuncts are every 3 years.
Okay, and how effective would you say that they are?
The classified ones are effective.
Okay.
They are good. It's a very simple review. One thing I do like about it is that the classified staff person is invited to write a response, whether that's to say, I agree with this is a lovely review, or to rebut things. I very much encourage that, even if it's a glowing review. But with the adjuncts, I don't find it's very effective at all, because every 3 years is not very good. And the adjunct performance review is currently based on classroom observation. So it's me essentially watching them for an hour at the desk if they aren't doing an instruction session.
So it's just the one observation every 3 years. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? But that's what I can go on.
Okay.
And so it doesn't give me much leeway to move out someone who's not performing up to par, especially if that adjunct is on what they call the eligibility list.
Okay.
If they're on that list, then they're here until they quit or die, which happened in one case, and sadly enough, yeah. But,
okay. Now, if you don't mind me asking, does the dean give you and the other librarians annual reviews as well? So
we're tenured here, or tenure track here. In the first 4 years of your that you're here, in the first year you get reviewed by a 3-person committee that's made up of the dean or the dean's designee, so it could be the associate dean, and an inside faculty member and an outside faculty member. So my committee was my dean. It was a faculty member from the history department and a faculty member from actually, it's just 2 faculty members, not one inside, one outside, and a faculty member, a counselor. And so they reviewed me in the first year in the fall and the spring, and then every year after that they review you in the fall, and they do a 1-hour observation. The observation can be anything, though. My dean observed me running a division meeting. He asked me to run the division in a meeting in his place, and one of my other tenure committee actually sat in on it as a guest, and they both wrote up evaluations of how I run a meeting, because part of my skills are managerial. So that was valid for them to do. I'm currently chairing 2 tenure committees, even though I'm only just earning tenure now, for the 2 newer librarians. So Erin and I will, I'll observe her on the desk. I've observed her teaching, but I'll say, you know what, we're going to sit and talk here, and you're going to walk me through your ordering process and your decision-making process on materials, because that's part of her job. After we earn tenure, it's every 3 years. And what's really interesting is then it's a 2-person review committee of your dean and an outside faculty member that you get to choose. So if I have a best friend on campus who's a faculty member, I can say, hey, come on and do the evaluation of me. But essentially, if they found at any point that I wasn't doing my job properly, then there are built-in mechanisms